Good evening, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting paper ghosts. Alright, this evening I'm just going to change the tone of this pink so it provides a higher contrast for the next layering of shapes that will be pouring out of the mouths and flowing around the composition. So I've got some alizarin and crimson mixed up for that, with some liquid and a little bit of white that I will go back and hit the interior most portions and kind of blend it out to give it kind of a glowing, deepish red tone.
Thanks all for coming, and join me with welcoming Jonathan Ark. Thank you. Normally I don't like to read lectures, but I'm going to do that tonight, and I want to beg your indulgence, and I'll explain a little bit why. As Bob mentioned, I just am now publishing this book, Pharmacotheon. Unfortunately, we don't have copies to sell, but it is in print finally. And what I'm going to read to you tonight is sort of a condensation of the proemium or introduction to this book. And as I was writing the book, I could say I've been working on it full-time for about 2 years as a full-time endeavor, but working on gathering information for about 20 years. And when I started writing it, I decided, well, I better keep politics out of this, because if I don't, it will be impossible to get it published. And but then I found it was coming out at the seams, and there were all these footnotes being appended to dry scientific discussions dealing with political aspect, and there's really no way to divorce politics from the science in this field. It has become politicized because the field itself is illegal. This pall of disreputability has been cast over it by the legal misclassification of these substances. So I decided, well, I will just take the bull by the horns, and I'll go directly for the jugular and deal with the political aspect of it right up front. And so that's what I've done, and I had to publish it myself. So anyway, and ordinarily I would rather speak extempore about this or about anything else, but I tend to, even if I'm given the subject of one plant, it usually takes me about 3 hours to get through the basics, and so, and this is a bigger subject, and so I decided the best thing to do would be to condense it, and then I can go hit the high points and really get to the meat of it in about an hour, and so that's what I've done. And I will read it, but there will be plenty of time for discussion, and I hope it will stimulate some lively discussion. And the title I've given this excerpt is Crimes Against Nature, the Civil War on Drugs. To paraphrase America's rustic president, Abraham Lincoln, we are now engaged in a great civil war, testing whether the modern nation state or its citizens will be the ultimate arbiter and judge of individual well-being and health, whether the citizen will be responsible for what pleasure drugs she or he chooses to ingest or to eschew, or whether an ostensibly benevolent, paternalistic state, supposedly guided by science and reason, will make that decision in loco parentis. Those paranoid individuals with no faith in the inherent wisdom and dignity of human beings today hold the upper hand, and ill-conceived laws have been crafted to proscribe certain drugs, with the unanticipated and unintended consequence of illegalizing innumerable plants and animals which we now know to contain those drugs. It is, of course, absurd for humankind to presume to illegalize other organisms with which we share this planet, and this could be seen as a laughable example of human folly run wild, were it not for the mounting toll of victims this tragic abuse of law and authority increasingly claims. Spinoza presciently foresaw the consequences of misguided attempts to, quote, control the desires and passions of men, unquote. And it is evident that the millions of contemporary users of proscribed drugs are laughing at the laws presuming to forbid them, and that they are far from deficient in the ingenuity needed to outwit those laws. It has ever been so, with laws regulating legitimate appetites of human beings, and there is no question such laws represent an abuse of governmental power. The great libertarian Edmund Atwill Lawson commented in 1914 in a critique of the prohibition of alcohol in the United States that it was, quote, one thing to furnish the law and another to furnish the force needed to ensure obedience, unquote. Law is the instrument of popular will in democratic countries, and when a law is sufficiently unpopular, as was the law prohibiting alcohol manufacturing and sale for ludicrous purposes in the United States, the people in theory will rise to overturn it. Would that it were so with unjust laws or unenforceable laws. When a government proves itself all too willing to attempt to furnish the force needed to ensure obedience to unenforceable and arguably unjust laws, then the very freedoms on which democratic rule is ostensibly founded are jeopardized. This is the case with the Civil War on drugs and the unprecedented intrusions into personal liberty which it inexorably occasions. It is a case where the cure is far worse than the disease, in which the proposed therapy is toxic and will prove fatal if administered in sufficiently high dosage. While the use of the drugs this shock therapy addresses continues unabated or indeed increases, freedom and dignity are on the ropes and in danger of going down for the count. I will adumbrate 4 lines of argument against the contemporary prohibition of drugs. Although disguised as public health laws, strictures against drugs are principally limitations on the pursuit of happiness and on the practice of religion in a broad sense, or in a sense broader still, are attempts to enshrine in law a certain perverse brand of what once was called natural philosophy. I call it science, and the overzealous modern laws against drugs are manifestly anti-scientific and indeed represent crimes against nature. A scientific perspective. Drug prohibition statutes are typically justified as public health laws, and conventional wisdom holds that in enacting and enforcing such measures, governments are exercising their paternalistic function of protecting the citizenry from dangers of public health, much as they would in framing and enforcing laws regarding sewage disposal, vaccinations, or pollution of air and water. Prohibition is thus seen as benign, indeed beneficent, and this viewpoint has become so firmly rooted in public consciousness as to make the concept accepted universally as a legitimate exercise, nay, as a solemn responsibility of capitalist and socialist governments alike. Nevertheless, viewed dispassionately and scientifically, this public health justification for prohibition won't hold water, and it can be argued rather that by placing certain drugs outside of the established quality control regimen for pharmaceuticals, governments are defaulting on their responsibility to protect public welfare. While some prospective drug users are dissuaded by laws, many, perhaps the majority, are not. During the prohibition of alcohol in the U.S. from 1920 to 1933, some alcohol users took the pledge and obeyed the law, whereas many, probably at least half, continue to use alcohol in spite of the law. Although it is impossible to establish firm numbers for present use of illicit drugs and the efficacy of the laws prohibiting them, there is no question that many millions of users, at least 20 to 40 million in the U.S., or about 10 to 20% of the adult population, are undeterred by the laws. During alcohol prohibition in the U.S., many inveterate users were poisoned by methanol and other solvents, poisonings which would not have occurred had legal controls of alcohol purity been in place, poisonings which ceased to occur once ludicrous use of alcohol and its sale for that purpose again became legal. Similarly, now there are some 3,500 premature deaths per year in the United States due to illicit drug use, many of them so-called overdose deaths from injected drugs, mainly opiates. Although these deaths are called heroin overdose, the great majority are rather due to adulterants and contaminants in illicit drugs, typical samples of which contain only a few percent of heroin or one or another artificial succedaneum, and illicit products may also contain dust, mites and other minuscule arthropods, spores, virus particles, and bacteria. On the other hand, medical injection, including self-administration, of sterile pharmaceutical opiates of known potency is a common, safe procedure, and deaths as a result of such use are virtually unknown. Injection of black market drugs has become a major vector of transmission of AIDS and hepatitis, Around 25% of all U.S. and European AIDS cases, including the majority of cases in heterosexuals, children, and infants, are a result of illicit intravenous drug administration. The barbarous practice of denying access to sterile syringes without a medical prescription prevails in the United States, whereas in most of the world's countries, sterile syringes are made available at low prices over the counter. This cruel and misguided measure is directly responsible for at least 25% of the new cases of AIDS in the U.S. and Europe. Far from protecting public health, prohibition is drastically expanding the AIDS epidemic and contributing to the deaths of thousands of individuals in the U.S. alone from drug overdose, individuals deprived of the protection of the Food and Drug Administration and its counterparts in other countries. This is especially important when we reflect that not all black market drugs are inebriants, not all drug users hedonists and thrill seekers. Owing to the restrictive nature of the U.S. pharmaceutical industry, there are black markets in curative drugs which have not been approved for sale by the FDA. Examples are the controversial cancer drug amygdalin or Laetrile, dimethyl sulfoxide, a treatment for bruises and sprains. Users must employ industrial grade as no pharmaceutical grade is available, and the AIDS drugs azithromycin, AZT, and dextran sulfate. There are even black market drugs which fit neither in the category of inebriants nor chemotherapeutic agents. Biotechnology products are coming to be used illicitly by athletes. There exists a black market in human growth hormone and erythropoietin for athletes. The black market in athletic steroids has been estimated at $100 million annually and is growing. These steroids are being sold by mail and in health food stores. Other damage to public health is occasioned by drug prohibition. Some illicit drugs have valuable therapeutic properties and thus potential to alleviate human suffering. They are not being systematically researched and developed as pharmaceutical products, owing to the pall of disreputability cast over them by their legal misclassification. LSD was originally developed by Sandoz in Switzerland as a pharmaceutical agent under the trade name Delicin. While the novel medicine showed considerable promise in psychotherapy, one of the most exciting pharmaceutical prospects for the drug was as an analgesic and psychotherapeutic adjunct to agonious therapy, treatment of patients with painful terminal cancer or other fatal diseases. LSD and other entheogenic drugs proved to be valuable, long-lasting analgesic agents in some patients with severely painful terminal conditions. Drugs which did not be numb and cloud consciousness in the manner that potent opiate analgesics do.
I'm going to set it up for more intricate shapes layering it. So that's it for the moment. That gets the pink settled to a tone that I like, which was really all I was setting out to do. I started thinking of maybe putting an aura around the blue eyes, but after I start having the shapes pour out of those shapes, may not be necessary. And even if I do decide to put a glow around those mouth eye forms, I should probably wait until this pink dries before I do that so that it blends over it smoothly. So yeah, here, let me get the camera off the tripod.
No currently accepted medical use, unquote, although limited further research along these lines. Heroin, called deadly poison in the U.S., continues to be
so that cleans up that color, and the rhythm is starting to get pretty nice. I'm liking the detail in the central figure. I did a little fine-tuning to him yesterday as well.
Since both heroin and LSD have legal medicinal uses in other scientifically
so that sets it up for the next phase. That's it for the moment. Thanaccepted for watching. Have a good night, Earth.
Medical use is patently false.